Should random monsters really be random? Welcome to my channel. I focus on tabletop role-playing games, video games, and science fiction. I was working on the next campaign I'm planning on starting, which is centered on the city of Anase. And I came up with a question. Should random monsters really be random? The reason I was thinking about this is I'm looking at the various districts in the city and the various areas in the city, and it didn't make sense to have, quote, random creatures show up there. Now, if you go back and think about a variety of different situations, should the monsters really just be random? That should be a fairly low probability that you just run into something random. It should be more programmed around what's going on in that area or region. If you're exploring a graveyard, would you really want, say, a troglodyte or a merman to show up? No, you really want something that's an undead, so you surely want something that's more matching with the type of situation that's there. But it also should be perhaps a different reason. They should have a reason why they're there. I was watching a video on Skyrim, and they were explaining some of the more interesting and esoteric things to find, and there was this one where you find this cave where the troll is, and in there are two dead stormcloaks. For those of you, those are two other non-player characters that are killed, and they have a book, and they have also a note from their commander that they were sent out there because there'd been some things cited and they didn't think they would require more than 2 people, but obviously the troll killed them and was planning on eating their bodies. But it added an interesting backstory to just the troll's cave, that he's there, that's his lair, and he killed things that are around it. So if your creatures have lairs and they're out defending their lairs, or they're out hunting for food. Now this comes into a problem if you're doing a standard dungeon crawl. You really need to think about what lives in which sections of the dungeon and where would they get their food. This gets into the ecology of the dungeon. But the other question that you have, if you're running an outdoor campaign, why would these creatures be wandering around in this area? Is their lair nearby, or are they really wanderers? Are they really heading out, and why are they wandering? And if they are wandering, there should be an explanation, perhaps on their bodies or whatever. So if you run into random creatures, that it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add to the richness of your world. You should have a reason why the characters or the monsters or whatever are in that area. That gets back into an interesting set of books. I think it was John Ringo wrote of things about the puzzling invading the earth, and the first few books. I really like the first few books of his series. But what happened is it described the puzzling, and they invade the earth, and thereafter food. That's what they eat, everything, just about everything they run across. Doesn't matter, and they will eat humans just because they're food. But they didn't patrol, but they just went out in massive bands. But toward the end of that, they had learned that they needed to do like military patrols because the humans were putting up such a resistance against them. But the idea that you have patrols, your orcs are intelligent so that they would have that, and then you have the hobgoblins who are very militaristic, and so they would be out on patrol. They would be patrolling an area trying to find other things. That's why you send people out on patrol, to either make sure your area is safe, or to see if you can engage the other kind of weapon, other kind of monsters or whatever. So you go out on patrol with your weapons to try and see what else is out there. So you could have patrols. This would be in a city. You would have obviously the city guard, if that's what's there, but you also may have local patrols or things that are controlling that local area. If you're in the area of the Thieves Guild, well, you would have some thieves who are watching just to make sure that that's there, particularly if there are multiple guilds where they're fighting or competing. Even great houses that would have their own set of guards to see that. You see that in Game of Thrones, where you have each house has their own set of guards and so on that control, that patrol their area and try and keep the peace, even though there may be city guards, but they don't want them involved in there. Today, in real life, you see a lot of places have their own guards. You see malls with their, you know, their mall cops or whatever you want to call them that patrol that, because they don't want to involve the normal taxpayer, as we say. Police officers are there. They're only called when there's a situation. So you have people who would be guarding, and those would be patrolling. So they would be on a regular cycle. So you could actually, if you're keeping track of time, you would know when these would come by and investigate. And perhaps, so those are different than just your random encounters. Random encounters go back to original Dungeons and Dragons, and like I've mentioned some of that, I've created my first dungeon following the ideas in original Dungeons and Dragons, and that turned out to be very boring. And you need to add purpose and reason to your adventures to add the depth. You can create a totally random dungeon. You can do that with all these tiles and such, and you don't need to plan your monsters. Everything could be random, but it doesn't add the depth to the story that I like to have, where there's a reason why these creatures are in this area, and if you kill them, there might be a note or a message or something that would lead you to understand why they're out in that area and what they're doing. So this gives you the idea of creating instead of random monsters, scheduled monsters. Think about it that way, that you schedule when creatures would show up in this area and for what reason, so that your players are there. So in it, you don't need to roll for random monsters. So it's always the question, oh, hand me the dice, I need to roll for, I need to roll. And the players are going, oh, we got to get ready in that. But now you have monsters that are coming, and the monsters may be listening. This makes it much nastier, because the monsters are normally patrolling, and they're on their, they're walking down the corridors, and the monsters are used to looking, so that they tend to walk through there. They always go their same route, and you see them, that's what they would be going. But you're coming into a new dungeon, and you don't know the schedule and the routes that the patrol is doing. So you come up, so you're coming here, and if your characters are talking, or that they've done something, they're breaking through, totally destroying the room to hunt for any possible treasure, they're making some noise, so that these patrol is coming up and looking at, they're listening and hearing the characters, so they can possibly surprise the party, because they were scheduled to come here at such and such a time to walk through there. So you can, instead of creating this chart of when the various random creatures that can occur here, you can actually schedule things like that. Now, if you want to get truly insane, you could start figuring out what daytime versus nighttime would be the first logical, because you have some creatures that only would patrol and hunt at night, and some creatures only patrol and hunt during the day. And you would have that. And if you want to get even a little bit finer grained, you could go all the way down to the hour, but that to me seems a little excessive, unless you're doing a really elaborate city. I'm not going to even do that. I will probably go to 3. I will probably do morning and afternoon and evening, because people act differently or are going different directions in the morning than in the evening. I get up in the morning and I have my morning rituals, and if you're commuting to work, then you have to get out and get into your vehicle and go to work or whatever. And that's true with most everyone. If you're a farmer or whatever, you get up in the morning and there are your morning chores. And then in the evening, you have your evening chores. You're coming back. So if you're coming home, you're going in a different direction. So you could schedule those type of things. You could break it down into morning and evening and during the night, who's coming out at night, because that to me seems like a logical breakdown of the organization, particularly where you're doing a city, where you have morning encounters and evening encounters and nighttime encounters. But all your creatures now have a purpose and why they're there. So you know what is going on with all your creatures. You know why they're there and what they're looking for. So if your party does do, oh, I stake out and I try and determine their ritual, you've already got that worked out for a city adventure. You know that at such and such a time the guards are going to walk by here. I see this when I occasionally go to the mall and walk, try and get some exercise in, and you see the mall security guards who are going through, and they just trying to be observant, and you see in the mall that I'm at, they have little on the walls in certain places. You see the security guard come up and he has something that he has to, what it is, it's a barcode reader. He has to scan because it shows that he's been to that part of the mall. That's how they keep track of what they're doing. I've thought about a nasty thing as I was thinking about taking a photograph of the barcode and coming home and printing a different barcode to come back and put over the top of it. But that would be cruel. I'm not that, but that would be a nasty prank to play on the security guards because it would screw up what they're doing and how they keep track of their hours. But it's something that you have similar ideas where you have to have the tokens. It goes way back where people did that, where you had to walk through and you had to, you had just a stack of colored stones. They were all one particular color, and you had to go through and drop a stone in each of the repository boxes along the way so that somebody could tell that you actually walked your route and were there. So then they just come back in the morning and check that each of the boxes, because it means that you had to do that because there was no other way. They empty out the box every morning, and you have to have something go on like that. So you could have the monsters are doing something like that. They've got a pile of stones. It sort of explains things. You're going through the dungeon and you find this little repository on the wall, and you open up some sort of container, and there's these colored stones, and what is this? And then when you find the creatures and dispatch them, you find they have a bag of these colored stones. Doesn't explain anything, but you could add a little bit more mystery to that. But it also establishes the route and the time and the schedule between them, so that you could have planned encounters, shall we say. They're planned out as far as what the creature is, why it's going there, and so on. So I encourage you to think about using scheduled monsters rather than random monsters, because random is just random. Now, you once in a while throw in a random monster where they are just wandering, but then you probably want to give a reason or some hint to the reason why they're in that area, and so on. So have you done this as a dungeon master? Have you planned scheduled monsters rather than random monsters? Have you done any of this like in your dungeons or in your cities or in your towns where things are scheduled and things happen on a regular schedule? I'd like to hear the stories about that. So thank you for watching my video. I look forward to learning what you think about this video. Let me know in the comments below. I appreciate all your comments. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, give me a thumbs down. I appreciate both forms of feedback. If you're new here and would like to subscribe, you can click on the icon on the left. If you're interested, there's more content on the right.